Hello, hello. Good evening to you, Jacob.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm
It's a,
just gonna pour myself a glass of wine to enjoy while talking to you.
Yes.
yeah, we did the same. And anyone else in our audience here today is welcome to raise a bottle or raise a glass. Here's what we're drinking. This is a 2017 vintage of the Jezreel Valley Argaman. One of
That's
our
a, that's a celebration. Premature to celebrate, but hopefully we can
It
truly
was
celebrate.
what we had available, and I'm very honored I get to drink it today. Honestly, I was like, wow, that's what we have. So,
Well, we definitely, as Americans, we celebrate that. We're not trying to be political, but we believe
Yeah,
Trump made the right, President Trump made the right decision um, in doing what he did and making that call, and so we definitely can celebrate
yeah,
that decision and pray that what happens from here is going to get better and better for all parties involved and minimal loss of life and freedom
amen,
for the
amen,
Iranian people. So,
amen. Listen, the most important thing is, for me, was that President Trump. By the way, I'm drinking Alpha just because it's got the Shiraz Syrah in it. So.
oh, nice. Very nice.
Um, So, I think it was very important that President Trump, in his statements, immediately said, now let's figure out how to get to peace.
Hmm.
Um, and again, not I'm also trying to be very apolitical, which is super challenging both in Israel and in the States right now.
Yep.
But be that as it may, I think that's exactly the message that you want to hear, which is no matter what's happening, we need to remember that we have to strive towards peace, and that should be our lodestar. That's where should we should feel that we should be headed at all times. Um, so I'm very glad that that was part of his message.
Yeah, likewise.
yes, me too. Me too. Well, I think he has most of the questions for today, Jacob, but I was
Okay,
actually just thinking, this for everyone here, we'll have a conversation for a second, but I actually saw you, Jacob, almost like right at a year ago when you were here in the States. I can't believe it's
right.
been a whole year, but
Yep,
uh,
yep. It was
what a year
exactly.
it's been. What a year it's been.
Yeah, you never ask. Certainly, when dealing with the Middle East, never ask like how long something will take, because we're a region with a very long memory. Our short-term memory sometimes isn't so good, but our long-term memory is we think in millennia.
Mm,
Uh, that's sometimes the problem, is that we uh, we sometimes get used to things taking too long. Um, but I was just talking, in fact, about seeing all of you, or some of you, sorry, a year ago, because I'm trying to figure out how to get my youngest daughter to camp in a few weeks. She goes to camp in Colorado.
oh
I
wow.
think I mentioned to some of you, and camp starts on July 17th. So any plane reservations that I did have became irrelevant. So I'm trying to figure
Mm.
out.
Oh
I
man.
may be, I may be crossing the River Jordan in the opposite direction to go to, to get her to camp, to go to the airport in Amman.
Oh
Is
wow.
there are there any travel restrictions for Jewish Israelis going in and out of Amman right now?
No, thank God we haven't made the peace the way it should be with Egypt and Jordan, but through thick and thin, everybody's kept to our peace treaties, and And uh, the both the Jordanians and the Egyptians, I think, have gone way beyond, the call of duty to smooth the passage of Israelis in and out over the past week, and certainly both the Egyptians and Jordanians have done, uh, again, way beyond the call of duty in terms of actual security coordination, and the Jordanians taking an active role in protecting the airspace and shooting down. How do you call them in? They're not drones in English. They're bigger than drones, like whatever they're called. I know what they are in Hebrew.
We
Uh,
call them UAVs on our
yeah, yeah,
unmanned
okay,
aerial vehicles. Yeah,
yeah. So
yeah.
yeah, so yeah, but people, I know quite a few people who came back to Israel through Aqaba in the south, or the King Hussein Bridge in the north, um, and pretty smooth. And I know people who also flew through Sharm el Sheikh in Egypt. I know people took buses to Cairo, all kinds of journeys happening.
Wow. Well, we will pray that you guys will have wisdom on what to do for the camp and traveling and the best course of action for you guys. And everything's a moving target right now, as they say. And
Hopefully not, but yeah.
well, yeah, that's sorry, that could be interpreted the wrong way. The our plans are all or need to be
Sure.
flexible. That's a better way of putting it. But um, Jacob, in a minute, I want to ask you if you would just kind of, for anyone that doesn't know who you are, give us a quick introduction of you in Jezreel Valley. But before we do that, I have to say something that was burning in my heart this morning, kind of to kick off our time together. I was just praying this morning as I was out in my garden checking my tomatoes, and I was really stirred by what President Trump said last night. And the in his very short little address to the nation,
Mhm.
I guess it was 8 or 9 o'clock last night. But as far as I am able to tell, and as far as Chat GPT knows, it was the first time in the history of the United States that a U.S. president openly declared love for God and said, "We love you, God," and the level of thanks that he gave to God. And I thought that was worth noting, and really an interesting moment that he would go out of his way to say that and kind of top off the speech. And so as I was in the garden this morning, I was just thinking of, really where do we need to be focused right now? And that is squarely on thanks to God and continued prayer to him, for he's the Holy One and the protector of Israel. And Psalm 20 came to my heart. So I'll just read that real quick here, and then I'm going to hand it back to you, Jacob. So, Psalm
Sure.
chapter 20, for the music director, a Psalm of David. And this is the Tree of Life version for anyone that wants to follow along. So, may Adonai answer you in the day of trouble. May the name of the God of Jacob set you up securely on high. May he send you help from the sanctuary and support you from Zion. May he remember all of your meal offerings and accept the fat of your burnt offering. Selah. May he grant you your heart's desire and fulfill all of your plans. We will shout for joy in your victory and lift up our banners in the name of our God. May Adonai fulfill all of your petitions. Now I know that Adonai saves his anointed. He answers him from his holy heaven with saving strength of his right hand. Some have chariots and some have horses, but we remember the name of Adonai our God. They have collapsed and fallen, but we rise up and we support each other. Adonai, save the king. Answer us on the day that we call. Amen.
Mm.
Yeah. So, Jacob, I'm going to hand it to you. If you would give us an introduction of you and the winery, and just tell us, after you share that, why don't you transition to just sharing kind of a general update of the last week.
Yeah, sure. So hello everyone, shalom. Jacob Ner-David, founder, chairman of Jezreel Valley Winery, longtime friend and fan of Israel good wine. As I am also a promoter of the Israeli wine industry as a whole. Jezreel Valley Winery was founded in 2011. Our first harvest was 2012. And formally we would be bar mitzvah already, but because it's been 13 years, but we took off for the sabbatical year. So we'll actually be celebrating our bar mitzvah harvest this coming harvest. And that's a whole other subject we could talk about at some other time. And the past really 5 years, I mean, we have walked this journey together, as a community for quite some time already. And, we've been through a plague and now a war. And thank God, together we'll get through it. But has been quite challenging over the past 18, 19 months. And then obviously over the past week and a day. And then, I compare it to those, days of COVID because we were cut off in a physical way back then and today. Airports being closed and people not having the ability to physically come to the winery, restaurants being here in Israel, restaurants being closed. So similar kind of feeling. The enemy is different, but a similar kind of feeling, and similar challenges. Us as a winery, just to come back to the winery itself, for those of you who are not familiar with our wines, I'll just kind of make a quick connection that some of you already saw me in some of my writings the past couple of days make, which is, as a winery, we focus on Mediterranean varietals, which are one that you may be familiar with under the name Syrah, but its other name is Shiraz. And Shiraz is obviously a significant city, both historically and in modern times, in Iran, in ancient Persia and in Iran. And Syrah and Shiraz are used interchangeably. The other varieties that we work with are Carignan, which has a history here in Israel. And then Argaman, which some people here are drinking, which is a cross that we created, a modern cross between Carignan and a Portuguese varietal called Sazao. And, for us, it's a particularly interesting thinking about the connections that wine has held for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. And throughout Jewish and Christian history, wine has played a central role. And the fact that Shiraz was known as a winemaking center thousands of years ago only kind of anchors the connections that we all have. So that's kind of what's going through our minds right now. And in fact, I'll tell you a quick little story about Shiraz. I don't know if you guys have heard me this. It was a real story that happened a number of years ago. Just as we came and reopened after COVID, the visitor center. So a group came up to the winery, led by a friend of mine. She was bringing eclectic groups up, and I was kind of talking to them and pouring some wine, and I was pouring a 100% single single vineyard, single varietal Syrah, which, as I was telling them, you could also call Shiraz. And as I'm pouring it for this young man in his early 20s, he starts kind of chuckling. And I said, "What's so funny?" He said, "Well, I just moved to Israel 2 weeks ago." I said, "Okay, welcome. That's wonderful. But what's funny about it?" He said, "I moved here from Shiraz." And I said, "What?" He said, "Yeah, my family are one of the kind of last remaining Jewish families in Shiraz. There's still a Jewish community in Tehran, but the community in Shiraz has been dwindling and dwindling." And his sister, who was sitting at the table also, had moved 2 years prior, but he had just moved 2 weeks before that to Israel from Shiraz. So that was a pretty
Wow.
wild
Wow.
connection.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Wow. Jacob, one of the things there's a few people in the audience that have no previous knowledge of the way you do things, and I always love pointing out one of our favorite things that you guys do, and that is really honoring the commandments in the Torah of how you handle the land and the vines, and specifically around the subject of the Shemitah, the seventh
Right.
year rest. And I'd love it if you could just touch on that quickly, and then also tell us about this year's vintage and how it's coming along and what you see in it, being that this is obviously a very, very interesting year for Israel with, with everything that's been ongoing, both, well,
Yeah.
last year, 2023, 24, and now this year. So I'd love to know kind of how the vines are doing and the grapes.
Sure, sure. So I'll talk about actually. I'll throw another thing in what you didn't ask about, which is there's the Sabbath and there's a sabbatical year. So they're obviously connected, right? The Sabbath is every 7 days, Shabbat, and we have the same cycle, but in terms of years, of 7 years. And in the seventh year, we let actually the land rest. It's interesting where it's not so much a commandment for us to rest, but it's actually to allow the land to rest. There's a whole other side of the sabbatical year of the seventh year. That's the agricultural side. There's another side of the sabbatical year, which is the economic side. Sadly, we've kind of written that out of modern life, and I hope one day we can kind of really tackle that and figure out how that plays into our modern lives. For those that don't know, during the sabbatical year, one of the economic hallmarks is the forgiving of all loans during the sabbatical year. And we can talk about during how in a capitalist society do we still retain our spiritual values. But in terms of the agricultural side, what we're commanded to do is literally let the land rest. And so you are allowed to harvest from the land for your own use, but not for commercial use. And you're not supposed to do anything more in the vineyards or the fields or the orchards or what have you. You're not supposed to do anything more than to protect the life of the vine, which is very similar to the Sabbath in terms of the weekly Sabbath, right? Where we're commanded to rest, yet to save a life, we can violate, we're told in the Jewish tradition, it's called pikuach nefesh, saving a soul, and you can violate any of the Sabbath commandments to save a soul. So it's, if there's any kind of fear of somebody's life. So very similarly, we so honor the vineyards and the orchards and every kind of life, even vegetation, that you can do whatever you need to do to make sure that the vineyards don't die and don't get irreparably damaged, but no more than that. So it's an interesting balance. What we do is we put big signs on the vineyards saying we are observing the Shemitah, the sabbatical year, and all are welcome to come pick grapes and do whatever they want want with them, hopefully to eat them or make wine from them. And some people, thank God, do come, and it becomes a nice activity. If you whatever you don't harvest for yourself, you just let it fall. Um, uh, and so that's what the sabbatical year was for us. So that worked out to, in the Gregorian calendar, the 2022 vintage. So there is no 2022 vintage from Jezreel. So an easy way to tell a fake from Jezreel, if somebody tries to give you a 2022 Jezreel, because there is no 20, there are no 2022 Jezreels. But there's an interesting thing, also very relevant to what we're going through today, which, there's a principle in our faith tradition, but it also extends obviously to I think almost all faith traditions, certainly monotheistic ones, which is you pray for a miracle, but you don't depend on a miracle, meaning you're a partner with God in kind of shepherding and stewarding what happens in this world. You can't just sit back and wait, but you're commanded to act. We're judged by our deeds. So, in that vein, we are supposed to do things, not just sit back and wait for miracles to happen. So whether that be, as I mentioned, whatever minimal work that you need to do, even during the sabbatical year, but you also prepare for the sabbatical year. So, for example, the year prior to the sabbatical year, we and many other Israeli vineyards, wineries, will produce more wine than we think we need for the market for that coming year to last us through that cycle of harvest. And with us, it becomes, and many other boutique wineries, it becomes even more challenging because many of our wines we age for, like the wine you're enjoying, many of our wines we age, for example, 18 months or longer before we'll bottle and release them. So, that means we have to be really thinking ahead and preparing for not having that vintage in our cycle. And winemaking is one of those things, and it's my parallel life is in the tech industry, and the tech industry, everything's imminently scalable, and especially these days with AI and so on. And winemaking remains the opposite. It's not scalable at all. And thank God, if everybody loves a particular wine from a particular vintage and they drink a lot of it, that's it. There won't be any more, and you'll need to wait for, could be 2 years before there's more. So I love that about keeps us very grounded.
That is definitely part of the beauty of it and mystery
Yeah,
of winemaking for sure.
exactly. So yeah, so the sabbatical year, and again, and the Sabbath, and I think, if you look, just I'll just throw this in just because it's just relevant. Um, this past Shabbat, for example, so we were sort of bracing for what would happen over Shabbat here in Israel. And so there are all the people who have to staff the home front command and put on the sirens and send out the warnings and so on. But even for somebody like me, where I usually put my phone to rest for the for the 25 hours of the Sabbath. So I left it on, with kind of the volume on, which I almost never have, with the volume on, just in case there was a warning or so on. And many other, people did that who usually wouldn't, have their phone on or something.
So just backing up a little bit over just this last week, I wanted to could you just tell us practically, like give us a sense of what it feels like right now to have lived the past, what is it, 8 days or 9 days?
Yeah.
Yeah, how long has it been now? 8 days?
Yeah, 8 days. It's very surreal, very, very surreal. Because, many of us have, if you've been in any kind of combat situation, but even if you haven't, if you're just kind of a student of history, you think of wars as, particularly the way Hollywood presents them, as nonstop action, where there's two hallmarks about this current situation. One, Iran is physically far away, right? It's not right here. It's the closest Iranian border is 1,500 kilometers away. So that's number one. So it's very different that we have this kind of war going on, but it's a the combat that's happening is us going there and them coming here, but not in a direct way. So that's very surreal, number one. Number two, it's kind of the other part of the thing that makes it very surreal is that it's happening in pulses. So you'll have a whole wave of missiles coming at us. The entire country goes into their bomb shelters, which, if you think back to what I said about not relying on miracles, you have to go into the bombs. You have to build the bomb shelters and you have to go into the bomb shelters. And thank God that pact kind of has been honored in that almost everybody who did go into their bomb shelters survived with minimal casualties. Obviously, every life is a world unto its own, and there were two bomb shelters that took direct hits, and families, literally families, were killed on the spot. But if you look, for example, in what happened in Tel Aviv today, in Ramat Aviv, and a bunch of pictures were released, I can send them to you later, where literally an entire block is just, looks completely wiped out, yet the people walked out of their bomb shelters. Like the entire building destroyed except for the bomb shelters.
Wow.
So in Hebrew, or actually it's not even Hebrew, it's Aramaic. You say "En somchin ala nes." Don't rely on miracles. You have to do your part. So that's the surreal nature of the past week. The airport's been closed. All restaurants, catering halls, that sort of thing have been closed. Obviously, the winery itself is closed to visitors, and the school system has been closed. So you just have like sort of people wandering around, kind of waiting for the next attack. It's a very, very strange situation.
Hmm.
And I know, sometimes people will say, "Oh, I can, nothing's going to happen the next few hours or whatever," and then they, regret their choices. One of my daughters, as some of you know, we have been blessed with 7 children. Many of them don't live in the house anymore, but they came back to stay with us because their own access to bomb shelters was non-existent or limited. And so one of my daughters was just getting so antsy the other day. She didn't listen to me, and on a run, she went out of the kibbutz. If you just stay in our little town, we live in a small town right next to the winery. If you just stay in the small town, there's like a loop around the town. and it's 2.3 kilometers around, and at all times you're within a minute from a bomb shelter. I mean, you could just knock on someone's door and you go in their house, and everybody would allow you to. I mean, nobody would not let you in their house. And so that's kind of getting your exercise in and being safe. But she just like, and I could tell, I totally connected with her feeling, because I usually do it every day, which is to run out into the fields and to the, mountains around us. As you know, we overlook Nazareth, and so we have these beautiful views. You come out and you run around, and really, really beautiful. So she did, and then the siren goes off, and she calls me, in a panic. We're in the bomb shelter, and she calls me and she says, I'm under a tree. What should I do? And I said, I'm coming to get you. She said, no, don't. I can see the missiles falling. Don't come. And so I waited like a minute till that sort of volley had finished, and I jumped in the car, and I ran, sped through the fields to go get her. She won't do that again.
Oh,
Wow.
Wow, that's sobering.
That's basically what life is like. And all of this, by the way, happening while we are counting now 625 days, that at least 20 hostages, who we know are still living, are still in Gaza, and 625 days that Hamas has yet to show any remorse or anything for the direction that they took us in. And when we look at the images of Gaza, which we should all cry over, they're terrible images of Gaza. I get very upset at people who don't show any I don't know what the right English word for it is, but any moral expectation of uh, of the leadership in Gaza, or those who are claiming to lead them. And I think similarly, and thank God to a much lesser effect, direct effect, the religious leadership in Iran, who all we want from them all we want from them, and I think which is the same thing that President Trump, going back to what you said before, all we want for them is to treasure life and say life is the most important thing. And of course, we shouldn't be pouring our resources into, engines of war and destruction. There's no one actually threatening Iran. I mean, there's no one. Maybe Iraq at one time they had a war, but Iraq is in no position to threaten Iran today. And very similarly, there's nobody threatening. There was nobody threatening. There's nobody threatening Gaza in a physical way. So I hope that we can get past it, and get back to what we should be doing, which is glorifying life.
On that subject of Iran, Jacob, I always appreciate our conversations because you have a wide depth of knowledge and history, and you're very well read. And something that has been interesting to me is listening to several people comment about the ancient history, the centuries long relationship that Israel had with the Persian Empire, and really how the decades of the last couple decades are so different from that. Would you kind of
Exactly.
give us a
Sure.
history lesson on that and comment?
Sure. Well, very, very short history lesson of a few thousand years. But the Persian Empire, it's very interesting. There's a tradition of Talmud study where if you study it's called a folio of Talmud, because In Hebrew, it's called a page, but it's a fake out because it's really 2 pages. It's a double-sided page. But if you study that double-sided page, one double-sided page a day, for 7 years, you'll finish the Babylonian Talmud. And the reason why I bring it up is that we just started a few days ago the tractate on idol worship. And in Hebrew, Avodah Zarah. And there were 2 empires that at the time of the codification of the Talmud kind of represented very different approaches, which was the Roman Empire and the Persian Empire. And the Roman Empire, right, was about conquering and basically destroying and not showing respect to the local culture. And there's many, many, many stories in the Talmud of the Romans not allowing the practice of Judaism and so on and so forth, which was kind of following in the Greek tradition. The Persian Empire, though, was very different. The Persian Empire also looked at itself as an empire, and it already was an empire at the time. But if you recall, the Persians kind of conquer the Holy Land and are in control of the Holy Land. And it's different depending on your reading of different parts of the Bible, including the Book of Esther. At a certain point, the Persian king not just allows but encourages the rebuilding of the temple, and there's a lot of kind of religious commentary around that, as God working through the Persian emperor and so on, and then basically encouraging the return of the Jewish people to Zion. So that's the kind of memory that's ingrained into the Jewish consciousness of the Persian Empire, not just being friendly in a political way, but very much encouraging the Jewish people to return to where they belong, to return to their practice, to return, to the point of rebuilding the temple. So if you go from there forward, the Persian Empire, the empire fell apart, but the Persian dynasties were, for the most part, before Islam, were for the most part very what the right word, kind-hearted or whatever, towards the Jewish population, and the Jewish population grew in Persia even after Islam took over in Persia. Remember, the Persians are not ethnically Arab, so it was a religious religious spread. It wasn't the same way, for example, in Indonesia or places like that. And but the Persian before the last 50 years, the version of Islam that was dominant in Persia was a pluralistic, kind of welcoming version of Islam, and which is why the Jewish community continued to flourish in Persia for literally 2,000 years, even after the Islam became the dominant religion. So, which is very different than many other countries in the region which didn't have a history of a significant Jewish presence and never encouraged one, whereas Persia did have a history and encouraged it.
Wow. Very interesting. And
Yep.
it'd be
And
interesting.
even
Yeah, go ahead.
what's even if you look at it, with everything that the it's popularly referred to as the mullahs, but the religious leadership in Iran who, took a strand of Islam in a very, dangerous direction. Um, Even they didn't feel they could kind of stamp out the Jewish community of Persia completely, because there was this, again, strong element within Persian history and so on of respect for the Jewish people, which is why even today, literally today, you have a Jewish community in Tehran, probably about 25,000 strong in Tehran, who live in constant fear, and every couple of years, a bunch of them are rounded up and executed for being Mossad agents and stuff. But they're not allowed to leave, so they're kind of stuck there.
I didn't realize it was that many. Like I knew there were still some there, but I just hadn't put, you know,
Yeah, they have
any-
operating synagogues and yeah,
yeah.
for
I mean,
sure.
I knew that they were. I just that's a much bigger number than what I actually had in my
Yeah,
head. So, wow, thank you for sharing that history.
sure.
Another number that I think is worth noting that became aware of in the last couple of years is the official like census records only acknowledge like something around 100,000 Christians, but there are very reputable sources that have better information on the ground that estimate somewhere between 800,000 to a million Christians in the underground Church of
Sure.
Iran. And of those, the majority of them are very supportive of Israel, like the kind of people that if they saw a Jewish person on the street, they would hug him and thank him, and an Israeli thank him for what they're doing to help liberate Iran. And
Well, not only, right. I mean, it's not, I mean, yes. I think you also have to look at the Baha'i community, um,
mhm.
which, is an amalgam of all kinds of faith traditions, pulled together. It's a very modern, very modern religion. Um, but the Baha'i as well, um, were they actually the Iranian regime, current regime, couldn't deal with the Baha'i and essentially either executed or expelled most of the Baha'i population. Um, and for those of you that are familiar with what goes on here, the holiest place for the Baha'i religion is Israel, because that's where the Baha'i prophets took refuge. And so you have in Haifa and in Akko, the centers of the Baha'i tradition. Um, and that again is another, Baha'i is spread throughout the world, but it's essentially a Persian creation. So it's another example of the connections between the Jewish community and the Persian nation.
I didn't know that there was a Persian connection. That's news to me. Wow, very
Yeah.
interesting.
I forget the name of their first prophet, but he makes the journey from Persia to Israel. Um,
Hmm.
and anyway, and that's why the first place he stopped was in Akko, and that's why Akko became a holy site, and then Haifa. But if you've been to the Baha'i Gardens in Haifa, um, that's the center of the Baha'i religion.
Wow, amazing. I think I've seen the building from a distance. So interesting. So we're 45 minutes in here, and I want to respect your time, Jacob. I know you're probably ready to hit the hay
As long
here
as as
pretty
long
soon.
as there's no siren, I'm okay.
Yeah,
I
we're
was
hoping you guys
I was
get.
I was on a business call the other day, and then like this was a Zoom, and all of a sudden the siren comes on, and I'm like, oh, that's my cue to leave. I'll see.
Yeah.
Well, before we end it, I just wanted to give a few minutes for anyone in the audience to ask a question of Jacob, and I think I will, let's see here. I have enabled for people to unmute yourself. So if you have a question, go ahead, unmute yourself, and whoever talks first will ask the first question.
Or if you're
Until people,
shy, you can put it in the chat too.
yeah, until people can answer the question, I will just say to you, you know, just because I, have to, as I said, you can't rely on miracles, and I have to put my sales hat on for a moment, which is what I described for us is the same for, every Israeli winery during the past 19 months, which has been, really, really, really challenging period. As I've shared with some of the folks at Israel Good Wine, in the months following October 7th, 23, um, we almost didn't sell a single bottle of wine in Israel. But that was very much the same for many other Israeli winery, and
Yeah.
it was really thanks to the ongoing support and just come down to the bottom line sales outside of Israel that kept the lights on. So
Wow.
so very much thank you to the whole community.
So you're
Um,
telling us we're helping make an impact. That's what you're saying, right?
you definitely made an impact and
That's
continue to
awesome.
make an impact. But also today, uh, just when things were kind of calming down, um, we're back to the same situation. So, um, while I'm very happy for people to buy Israeli wine at any time, if you do it now, it's you're doing an extra mitzvah, as we say. You're doing an extra commandment.
Good time to buy. Yeah, that's
It's
good.
very
That's good.
helpful.
Yeah. So anyone that has a question, please feel free to ask and unmute yourself.
Okay, Elizabeth here. Hi, Jacob.
Hi, Elizabeth.
I sent you a WhatsApp the other night, but I was very excited to see a local restaurant here in Dallas that had argamon on the menu. It was very expensive, so we're a better place to get it. But I want to say or ask you, because you're Israeli and American, and I feel like there's the practical support that people can do here, and of course there's prayer. But as Americans, there's definitely a sharp increase of anti-Semitism here. I don't know if you knew this, but we had a pro-Israel event that we were supposed to be at in Dallas get canceled a week and a half ago because of active threats against it. And that's in Dallas. So in terms of people locally in the States, we can't get to Israel to support. What are some practical ways that people can kind of combat the rhetoric or anti-Semitism? One of the things I love about you is you are such a peaceful man, and you're also a peacemaking man. Like, you really advocate for peace and people talking across belief lines and political lines, regardless of whether you agree or not. Find a place of agreement. And so, what would you say are ways that people can combat kind of the rising anti-Semitism here in the States?
I think a lot of the anti-Jewish rhetoric is for lack of education and lack of information. Um, I'm not making excuses for all people, but I think most of the time, um, there's an essential goodness in people, and they've just been steered in a very bad direction because they've been misinformed or miseducated. Um, and that's not to say that people can't be critical of the current Israeli government or of any Israeli government. Uh, people can certainly be critical. However, there's no but, right? I'm not saying but. I'm saying however. There's a difference between the however and the but. However, I do demand of people to be informed, to be educated. And if someone doesn't start a conversation about the Middle East with "it's complicated," then you already know they don't know anything. And the answer is it's complicated, and we have a long road ahead of us. And the also again lack of information. So, and you can't like throw facts at people. You have to really engage in conversation with something, that expression you may have heard called, active listening. But you have to kind of actively listen to them and then kind of demand that they listen to you. But again, not to I don't think you can throw facts around, because everybody can throw facts around. I think you have to say, hey, are you all about life and freedom? And if the answer is yes, you say, okay, so we agree on that. So let's build from there, because that's what peace is all about. That's what the peace process is all about. And then kind of slowly explain that, Hamas, as an example, is not a peace-loving or interested in peace movement. It, quite frankly, is a death cult, which is the sad part of it. That doesn't mean that all Palestinians are part of it or support it or what have you. And I think also people don't realize very, very, simple things. Like, for example, 20% of the Israeli population is either Muslim, Christian, Druze, and have, full, not just, civil rights, but are, judges in the Supreme Court and, CEOs of the largest banks and so on and so on. The fact that you have, for example, even within the Muslim community, and this every time I explain this to people, they like, it's too much information and it's too much complication, and like they can't handle it, right? So that the Bedouin of the north, who are fully Muslim, have 100% enlistment rate in the Israeli army, that the Druze have 100% enlistment rate in the Israeli army, and are some of the most senior officers in the army are Druze and Muslim, obviously also Christian. So many Christians have reached very high level ranks in the Israeli army. So once you start to kind of slowly bring them in, you can't throw it at them, right? You need to be able to engage them in conversation. If you're just throwing facts at each other, then it's just shouting at each other. You need to get people to agree to have a conversation. If somebody's willing to have a conversation, then you can kind of bring them in, and then they realize, oh wow, it's much more complicated than I thought it was. And yeah, maybe we can together critique certain, policies of the current Israeli government. There's sadly some people affiliated with some of the current ministers in the Israeli government who say and do shameful things to Christians. I'm not at all proud of that, and work against it. So there's nobody's perfect. But unless you engage people in conversation, it'll just remain, oh, they're the bad guys and whatever. So I know that's a very, high bar in terms of what to expect from people, but I don't think you could do anything else. Literally anything else will just, it'll just be, you just devolve into shouting at each other, and just doesn't go anywhere.
The good news, thank you, because I feel like that's so practical. Even like some of the points that you made are very good practical, like wading your toes into the water of conversation. But I also appreciate that you have given us a vehicle to have those conversations be much easier, and that's with sharing wine. Because it's
for those people who drink wine.
Yeah, you just drink wine and then have those conversations, and hopefully they'll go over a little smoother and be surprising to people. But
yeah. Look, I mean, it's the usual, conversations. Now I know you've had these conversations with people, but to bring it all back to wine and to kind of what connects us, which is, by the way, I'm getting towards the end of my day, so I can drink as much as I want. But when you say to somebody, hey, and you have to remind them, hey, well, you know that, Jesus was Jewish, and then they go, what? What are you talking about? And you say, yeah, and do you know when do you know what Jesus's first, public miracle was? And, so they may know or may not know. And then, you tell them that, remind them if they, or tell them if they don't never heard of it, of the wedding at Cana and so on, and say, hey, do you know what he was at? He was at a Jewish wedding because he was Jewish and he was at a Jewish wedding. And I think it just starts to, kind of shake people up when you start to take them through stories, which, again, if they're Christian or come from a Christian background, they're their stories. I'm not foisting upon them my story. I'm taking them through, their story and saying, well, okay, so let's build on that. But there's so much, I've seen a bunch of these things where, Charlie Kirk, for example, I've seen a bunch of, videos where he's talking to people in audiences, and even he'll say, Jesus was Jewish, and there'll be people like, what are you talking about? So I think there's, minimal levels where you need to get to, and yeah, wine is definitely a great way to, break bread and drink wine. So
Yep.
cheers.
I just recently became aware that they have located what they believe is the authentic location of the wedding of Cana, which there's another location that Alana and I have gone to, and we toured it, and then we tasted the wine.
Oh, no wine.
I
I'll tell you someday the true story of most of that kind of wine. But anyway, but look, is it exactly? And that's why we don't know. But is Nazareth Nazareth? Yes.
yeah.
Was there a village? Was there a village of Cana? Just outside of Nazareth? Yes. Does a village still exist today called Cana? Yes.
Yep.
Like these are just like don't, you can't get away from that. So the usual thing, which is, these are stories that have been handed down, right, for 2,000 years, more or less the same story, right? So, how we all know games of broken telephone, that a story has been handed down and has been kept intact for thousands of years means, it's got some accuracy to it.
I think so. It's pretty cool. Yeah.
Absolutely. It's been an hour, and want to honor everyone's time, including yours,
Sure.
Jacob. Any parting thoughts or any prayer requests that you would have for this audience that we can join in agreeing with you for?
I would say, obviously, any of the Psalms and there many are that speak of peace, but um, how do you say in English? Lo yisagoy al goy cherev v'lo yimadu al milchama. That nation, you'll know this once I start saying it. Lo yisagoy al goy cherev. That nation will not lift up a sword against another nation, v'lo yimadu al milchama, and they will no longer teach the ways of war.
Yep.
But I'm badly translating.
Is that from Isaiah?
Isaiah, yeah.
Yeah, the last chapter of Isaiah, I think.
Exactly. Certainly any of the Psalms and any of the calls, for peace that are spread throughout the Bible are definitely a way of connecting. But what I think is also important to have in mind when you're in your prayers is something that one of my teachers taught me, which is and in the Jewish prayers, if those are familiar with the kind of standard Jewish prayers, so there's a prayer for peace 3 times a day, but it's not just a prayer for peace. So we're commanded to make peace, taseh shalom, to make peace. And in order to make peace, you can't just, pray for one side. You have to pray for both sides to want peace. Because my teacher, Rabbi Shlomo Karlebach, taught is that almost every other commandment in the Bible you can fulfill by yourself, for yourself. But peace requires that you do it with someone else. You have to make peace with someone else. So when you're praying, obviously, I'd love for you to pray for us, but not only for us, because we need, in order to make peace, we need the other side to want to make peace too.
That's so good. What good wisdom in that phrase. Thank you for sharing that. And wow, time flies when we're having a good conversation and drinking
Good wine.
Yeah, excellent wine.
The
By the
wine
way,
is
this
very good.
2017 is just delightful.
No,
Yeah.
I'll tell you, I'll end with a wine thing, by the way. And then this will really be my kind of parting thing. But so as you know, just because you're drinking that wine, I'll tell you this. So there's this competition in wine competition, a global wine competition called the Decanter Worldwide Wine Competition. It takes place once a year in London, and over 18,000 wines are submitted, and you get ranked either no rank or bronze, silver, gold, platinum. And in 2022, I was kind of like coming out of COVID and everything, and it was the first time we were submitting a wine. So I submitted the 2017 Argaman that you're drinking. I submitted that to the 2022 competition, and I forgot that I had submitted it, and I only made it in time to the submission because my good friend Amichai, the CEO and winemaker of Shiloh Winery, like sat on my head and made
He's a
sure
great
that
friend of ours. Yeah,
yeah,
that
yeah,
sounds like Amiha.
yeah, sat on my head to make sure I made it on time. And then I get an SMS from Amichai, and you submit the wine in February, and you don't get the results till June. Anyway, one June morning at 6:30 in the morning, I get a text from Amichai, OMG 96. Then I text Amichai back, and I say, Amichai, it's 6:30 in the morning. What are we talking about? And he says, you didn't check the decanter scores yet? They came out last night. I said, no, I just woke up. So I checked, and the 2017 Argaman received a platinum medal, 96 points.
Wow.
Highest rated Israeli wine in 2022.
Wow.
So that's the wine that you're drinking. So
Wow.
I'm
Excellent.
gonna drink it
Wow.
slowly.
Yeah.
enjoy it.
This might be our last bottle of it, actually. I think it is. Oh man.
Yeah, I think I only have
Wow.
like 2 bucks left.
Yes.
Anyway,
Yeah. Wow. Well,
enjoy.
thank
Wow.
you so much for
Yeah.
joining us. And
Yeah.
for those of you who came in at the end, we have recorded this, and so we will have that available for you before too long.
And I'm happy to we'll keep the chat open for a few more minutes. We'll let Jacob go because it's bedtime there in Israel, and we know you guys are tired. I know the whole nation is
Yes,
tired.
in a very practical way. If you could all pray for a good night's sleep
Yeah.
for all of Israel.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well,
Yeah.
just right now, we say, we just thank you, God, for protection tonight, that tonight would be peaceful, that it would be, angels would surround Jacob, especially and his family, but the entire country of Israel, and that this would be a full night's rest. We ask for a full night's rest where tomorrow there will be the ability to see new outlook and have new hope in the morning when the morning comes. And we also just thank you for protecting innocent life in Iran as well. And we also ask that you would give their hearts the desire for peace in the middle of this as well. So we just thank you that you are a God of peace who is with us. Amen.
Amen.
Yeah.
Amen.
Have a good day, everyone. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you again, Jacob. Really
Yeah.
appreciate you coming on with us tonight. Yeah. Well, everyone, thank you for joining us. Happy to stay on if anyone else has any questions or comments for at least another 5 minutes here. I know a few people joined right at the end. And Alana and I have been monitoring the situation quite closely since it started. As many of you might know, we were in Israel when October 7th happened, and we go to Israel every year, sometimes multiple times a year for usually about a month at a time. And we have a lot of friends there. We have a lot of, obviously all the wineries that we work with, something close to 100 wineries that we are friends with and have contact with. But then aside from that, many, many, many friends all throughout Israel, both in uh, Arab believers, Christians, Arab Muslims that are in the old city that we have friends with. And then, of course, many dozens of Jewish people. We do know a few Druze people, and so it's challenging for all of them. But yeah, anyone that has a question, feel free. I believe it's still available if you want to unmute yourself to ask a question. Happy to do that. And say 5 more minutes.
Thank you guys for putting this together. It was very encouraging to hear what is happening from another perspective and to see the optimism that they still carrying. It was moving and touching and inspiring. And thank you for supporting Israel on a very practical way, but also in a very meaningful way. So thank you for this. Enjoy it. I love you both.
Thank you. Thank you, Tete. We also are very grateful for you and the work that you do in media. For anyone that doesn't know who you are, we just honor you and the voice that you have and the excellent media that you put out, being a supporter of Israel and what's going on there. So thank you for sharing that. In the chat there, Elizabeth is asking me to give a State of the Union just from the conversations we've had this week. So very, very much along the lines of what Jacob shared, everyone that I've been in communication with, which is something like around 200 people on my WhatsApp account. Everyone has been in and out of the bomb shelter, pretty much the whole nation. I mean, there are very few places in Israel that have not had warnings go off. So in and out of the bomb shelter, most of those attacks happening in the middle of the night. So the amount of sleep that has stolen, the stress that it has induced, the anxiety levels, a lot of people being treated for anxiety. And some of our friends that live up in the north, some of their kids are really struggling right now, just understanding the whole situation. And so definitely prayers needed for just the mental, emotional state of people there. And I don't have any direct contacts in Iran, but I do feel like it's just as important to say the people in Iran that don't want to be caught in the middle of this, that really want freedom. We need to remember them just as much, and really believing for their freedom to take place, and for whatever happens next in terms of the government there, for us to be praying that a new government that is a good government is raised up in Iran, and that those people have the opportunity to live free and to have better opportunities for their families. So, yeah, that's. I'm trying to think of any other highlights, but I think that's a pretty good summary of this last week. Does
Brenda-
anyone else have a question before
I
we?
think Brenda had one. I've seen her mute go off.
Did you say Brenda?
Did Did you have one, Brenda? You're more than welcome to. No? Um, well, I wanted to say one thing. One of our winemakers, our other winemakers that we talked to this week, he said something that was just really I thought was really impactful. And he said, I'm out here and I'm still going to prune my vines when I can, when I don't need to be in the bomb shelter, and I'm still going to work on making really good wine because this is my place. My place is to make the good wine that I can and to do the work that I can in this moment. And I think times are so uncertain right now, one of the things that we can also, each one of us, is be like, where's our place? And how can we participate in that place? So I would just, um, I know that it kind of feels weird to be like, hey, buy wine, but just so you all know, it really does make a big difference to everyone on the ground if you're able to participate in that way. Of course, there's many other ways to participate in loving Israel and supporting them right now. And even if you can only find one way to do that, it's find your place and do that. And we're so grateful that you are. So I think that was all
Yeah.
Thank you all for joining us. We're so grateful to have you, and we will send out a link of the recording very soon.
Yeah, thank you to everyone. If you want to buy any of the Jezreel wines specifically, if you go on our website, israeligoodwine.com, go to the shop page, and then you can sort by vendor on the left-hand side and just select the Jezreel Valley Winery vendor. And we have 4 of their wines in stock right now. And we would really encourage you to do that, and tell your friends about it as well. We really are grateful for everyone that can practically do that right now, and just as Jacob encouraged us, to have good conversations, invite people to the table, and continue to speak truth, and just do it in an honoring and loving way. So thanks again to everyone that joined today. We will post the recording of this so you can share it with your friends. And we once more lift a glass and say l'chaim, to life. And we thank you, God, for your protection over Israel and your protection over the United States, the people of Iran. And we ask that you would swiftly bring peace to the situation. Amen. Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.